So yeah, this is the beaver pelt, and it is still in the drying process, definitely. And on this side is the side that has been salted and scraped, and all the meat taken off. So it is in a very, very long drying process, especially because beaver contains a lot of fat. They, they live in water and everything like that. They contain a ton of water overall. So drying them takes a while. I'll first do the head. So there's the nose, the eyes. This was trauma sustained. Ears. So here's the face. This is a cape skin, as I said before. So you go down to here. You have the full mouth. Mm-hmm. And then this is where one leg was. And this one got cut at a different point. And then down here, back leg, these are the two pads that would go on the back. And then this is where the tail was. But for skinning beavers, most people actually attach a fake tail because skinning beaver tails is a joke. Yeah, the beaver was found about a week and a half ago on the roadside by a couple of people here, and so they picked it up, and it was a very fresh kill. So took it back and threw it in the freezer. So I got my hands on it just a couple of days ago and took the time to thaw that out. And that thing, because beavers are big, most people actually don't realize how big they are, but this was about 35-40 pounds, and that big. So he was a really good sized beaver. He was also a bit fat, but so thawed and skinned him, and we were hoping that the skull would actually be in good enough shape to get a really good skull specimen. Unfortunately, after the fleshing process, realized that the entire side of his face moved.
Was the pelt you were going after, or no?
Pelt, meat, and skull. Those were the three things that we were going for. So the pelt turned out really, really well so far. It's still in the drying process, and with pelts, there's so many different ways to process them, with shape and how you tack them out and everything. And it's very. This is my first beaver, so I was doing a lot of research to kind of figure things out, and also, we weren't sure if we wanted it actually stuffed as a museum specimen, but that just didn't happen at all, just because of the, it had been field dressed before. The integrity of the sides of the lining around the stomach were not quite as good. Field dress being, when it was picked up on the side of the road, it was gutted on site, and so that way it doesn't continue to have a very fast decay process, because especially with stomach acids and intestinal stuff, you get the amount of bacteria, and then you have bloating, and it's nasty. So so field dressing it makes that decay process not be so dramatic. And I mean, even though it was going straight into a freezer, you still have, when it thaws, it'll still bloat, it'll still do all that. So, yeah, it's just to minimize the grossness. So with the pelt, most people don't cape it. And when I say caping, I mean when you have a fur bearer, a lot of times you see them as like a tube shape, and they have like the full head. That is a caped skin, because you have from here around the head, the full face, that's called a cape. But with beavers, normally they just skin, here, and they don't skin the bottom or do anything, so you don't actually have a full head. For that one, I actually did the full head. It came out really well, and so with that one, it's the pelt you can be able to see the whole face, and in the mouth, the nose, everything. So it's just cut here instead. So, but paws are taken off. With a museum specimen, you have to keep the paws on, and then you have to go in and get all the meat and the fat out of the paws, so that way it'll dehydrate correctly. Otherwise, it gets pretty nasty too. So, but it's a very intense process, and I just didn't have the time to take all that stuff out. So,
so there's going to be a pelt that goes. The
pelt will actually be part of the museum here. We don't have very many pelts here at all, so the only one variety, and so like for teaching, for showing people, in the local ecology is, it's nice when people can actually touch it, they can feel it, they can really see what these animals look like up close, and it gets that much more personal connection with nature in a lot of ways, because all of a sudden it's not just a picture of something, or like, it's not just a dead animal, it's, oh wow, this is really soft, this is why people bought these, this is why people shoot them, and, and trap and do all that stuff, but it's also just a piece of the local ecology.
What about the skull?
So, with the one that's currently in it, or just, yeah. So that one, the skull will go through a process. It, is obviously detached from the body, and then it is fleshed, brained, and then cleaned. And for that one, it will be a boiling process. So it's just taking a big pot, sticking on an outside propane tank, and cooking it. And that's usually when you brain it, because then you can kind of stick a screwdriver up there and mush the brain. And the thing is that also
where will that come?
Where?
The future of the skull.
Future of the skull, depending on the condition that it comes out in, it'll be here. So,
and then the last thing was the meat.
Yes. We ate that last night. And it was really good.
How do you prepare beaver?
So, we looked up online.
Hold on a second.
Yeah. So with the meat, I butcher, but when you have especially something like roadkill, you have to be very careful, because especially if it's, this one was pretty fresh, it was killed within hours. So, therefore it is, meat quality still, as long as the damage isn't too bad, and, a lot of other contingencies in there. And not a lot of people are into eating roadkill, but however, up here it's actually very common, and the extent of time that a fresh kill is on the road is ridiculously short, because so many people around here eat roadkill. So this is a pretty common thing. So pretty much for that, it was, you see the site of impact, and you don't take anything near there. It's, rule of thumb. And, since it was hit right in the chest and up, pretty much anything here up wasn't useful. But the tail is actually considered a delicacy, and it's like a really fatty pork, and it's white. And
how do you prepare it?
There are very many ways that you can prepare it.
How did you prepare it?
Fried it with a little bit of salt, and it tastes like bacon that is slightly beaver flavored. So it's not, it actually is really, really good. Very fatty and thick. But then with the rest of the meat that we used, it was hindquarters and pieces of backstrap. So, and the backstraps are, actually the best meat on most animals anyway. That's where you get your filet mignon with cow and really good loins. So my dad is a pathologist. So growing up, at about the age of 6, I'd go into work with him, and I would just hang out in the specimen room, and I would just look at the brains and the hearts and all the organs and tumors and all sorts of insane things. And my dad would hold up, a cancerous lung from, emphysema, and, a normal regular lung, and be like, and this is why we don't smoke. So, things like that, and, quite impactful when I was a kid, but, and also with heart disease or whatever other medical things where he wanted to show me at 6. And then he would take me in, and I'd watch him do frozen sections for all of his slide preps, and so I'd just hang out there for most of the day and follow him around, and it was fascinating. But it definitely, growing up in that atmosphere definitely left me some interesting traits, and he had to deal with a lot, considering that he would get his lunch ready. And one day, I didn't know that he had a meeting, but I was not a fan of Barbies, so at 4 years old, I ripped my Barbie's head off, stuck it into a bag, and into his lunch bag, and then during the meeting, he dumped his lunch and rolled away, did Barbie, across the table. So that was an angry phone call, and not so much glory after that. So no more Barbies for Carolyn. The reason that I do this is because I find it to be quite spiritual, in the fact that I'm taking an animal that has been killed or somehow maimed, whatever, and then giving it another life so people can also get closer to nature. And I use these primarily for educational purposes, especially with museums. It's a way just for people to connect with nature on a level that they normally can't. When you see this up close, it's really a beaver. It's not just a picture in a book. And then, because you can touch, you can feel, and you can see that it once had a life. And so this is kind of in a way giving it a new one after it's been killed. So I find it really important, and so the entire process I find to be an art form as well as just a way to respect and rever the nature that is around us.